Hey Jay.
Hello, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
All good.
Where are you from, Jay?
Um, I'm from India, Mumbai.
Oh, nice. Did we
Actually,
meet
by the
before?
sorry,
Did we meet before?
no, I have
I
joined
remember.
Trust webinar. I left
Oh, okay.
Decentralized. Yeah. By the way, it was
Yeah.
very useful. Yeah, especially your points on uh, tokenization, the same asset in different formats. It's not a stand. It's a standard problem, not just a technology one. I find it very useful.
No, thank you, Jay. Thank you. Really appreciate that. We're gonna talk like few things, probably how we have to kind of bring this as a standards problem, right? We'll talk about like few things today as well.
Sure.
Hey, Ralph.
Hello.
Hey, how are
Going to
you?
put on a shirt for you guys today.
Thank you. Ralph, I mean, I came to Miami. The consensus, today probably would be the last day, and then like traveling back to New York. Weather is like much
How
more
is
nicer here.
it?
It's good. Like a lot of great meetings, a lot of really great meetings. We'll talk more, Ralph. I mean, there are like a few ideas. Also met like Daniela yesterday, and
Good,
few more folks. It's gonna be very
good,
interesting.
good, great.
And Ralph, again, I was super tied up on. Traveled on Monday. Probably like I'll be traveling back. Thanks for already sharing your videos. I went through them, and it's a few questions for you, and then probably we
Okay,
can talk
good.
about
That's
that.
fine. That's good. That's good. I'm glad, but I hope it gives you the perspective of what you recognized as a big problem, that there is a solution for this big problem. There's many other problems to solve,
No,
but that one is solved. Okay.
no, that's one of the biggest pillar of where we can bring the standards into the industry as well. Where are you right now, Ralph? In the Swiss?
I'm sorry.
Where are you right now? Where are you
Switzerland, yeah.
located?
Switzerland. Outside of Zurich today.
Okay. We'll just wait maybe like for a couple of minutes and then we'll get started. Peggy. Hey, Sarvesh.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
Great.
Hey Ralph, how are you doing?
Sarvesh, not sure like if a few folks may be joining the call. Do you want to kickstart or like how do you want to?
Let's just give them a few minutes before we start. I wanted to kind of start with a roll call. So, anyways, let's give everybody a couple of minutes. After that, I'll just go over take a roll call of people and get some introduction on what everybody is up to and what they do, and then we can go over a little bit about what OTAS is and why we have this initiative in place and what is it that we are looking for from our perspective.
Fantastic.
Yep. Ralph, I would love it if you could speak a little bit about the identity stream that we have in place. Any perspective from your end would be really helpful because you're a stalwart in that stream. So would appreciate if you could speak a little when thanks.
I can do that, yes.
Appreciate it. Just a couple of minutes more and then we can start, yeah?
Maybe Sarvesh, let's get started. I know people
Sure.
will join.
Sure.
Yeah,
No
thanks.
worries. All right. So, as I said, let's start with a simple roll call. So I'm going to start with myself. I'm Sarvesh Naidu. I'm the engineering manager here at Open Assets. I'm part of this whole OTAS initiative where we wanted to kind of bring open standards for asset tokenization across all domains and streams. Um, I'd let Surendra, our CEO, CTO, speak more about our open assets and what the initiative is. But that's pretty much what I do. I've been I have almost 25 years of industry experience in all different domains from trading, insurance, and blockchain. So come with a little bit of experience, but here I'm going to learn a lot more from all of you as well. Thanks. Surendra, you want to go next?
Hey, quick introduction. Surendra, COO and CTO of Open Assets. We this, yeah, we build. Sorry about that, guys. So, yeah, I mean, we are the infrastructure provider for like one of the largest stablecoin providers like the Tether and also for the New York Stock Exchange. What we really kind of like in doing this, coming from the capital markets background, we wanted to kind of like in build the capital markets at scale. That's when we wanted to be kind of like in building the standards or bringing the standards together because there are like a lot of standards in this industry. Probably it may not have seen some of the things on the compliance, the settlements, and the identity or asset metadata. Our mission is to kind of like bring as a contributor to the open source community, how we can able to kind of work together. More than happy to kind of go in depth some of the production problems what you have seen for the largest stablecoin issuances and also with the largest the uh, exchanges like Web, how they have faced their traditional finance to the digital finance. More than happy to kind of cover in depth of that. But this is a standards call. We wanted to be a contributor to the open source standards, and then we love to kind of join hands with all of you together, how we can able to kind of bring more goodness to the industry as well.
Awesome. Thanks. Ralph, you want to take a stab at it?
Hi, my name is Ralph Kubli. I am with a company called Ariadne. I'm on the board. I'm also on the board of Validation Cloud. It's another company that does Web3, but here I'm participating kind of like as the standard bearer for the open source Actus financial standard, which is a deterministic and consistent definition of financial instruments in algorithmic form, basically. So that's about me.
Awesome. And welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guy?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm a product manager in Open Assets. I've been an engineer, a mechanical engineer by formation for 15 years, had my own engineering company for 10 years, shifted my career to finance and Web3 industry in 2022, 2023. I've been a product manager ever since in different companies. Now I'm leading the tokenization business in open assets, including a large part of our OTAS initiative as well.
Thanks. Last but not least, Redvin?
Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So I'm Redwan. I'm the executive director of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. So we are a standard organization for Ethereum institutional adoption. And I've recently been working around attestation services for replacement of the on-chain ID module on ERC-3643. And I reached out to the team of Open Asset and talked with Gabor at a panel like a couple of weeks ago. And so I was invited to join like this call today because I'm very interested about the work that you're doing. That actually I think it's super important in the ecosystem.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. So to jump right into it, right? I mean, as Surendra clearly mentioned, right? What is OTAS, right? We are trying to set up open standards for asset tokenization. This has been broken into multiple streams, right? We've got our settlement network, our identity, compliance, and our asset metadata. These are the four pillars that we are focusing on. Obviously, there is a lot more out there, but our main core focus is on these four streams, right? The way we want to proceed is we want to identify all the stuff that is available out there today before we start looking and building and documenting. Research is very important in this kind of stuff that we are building. So ideally, our first step is setting up our GitHub repos correctly. I'm so sorry, Jay. I didn't give you a chance to. I think you were not there. Sorry about that. Do you want to quickly give your introduction before we go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone, I'm Jay. I'm currently from OTAS Lab of Technology, currently pursuing my BTech in AIML. Actually, this is my first community meet for OTAS, and have been following the project closely after this LF Decentralized Trust webinar. I found this webinar very useful, especially what Surendra point about tokenizing the same asset in different formats. This is the standard problem and not just technological one. So yeah, currently from my technical side, I have been an active open source contributor, a GitLab Hackathon 2026 winner, have prior experience in companies like Coding Junior and Bread Butter. Yeah, that's from my side.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So, it seems everybody has different experiences and different levels of experience,
Oh,
which is what exactly,
so Resh, there's a few
you
more
know,
people. I see Elizabeth joined. Who else?
I don't, I'm
That's
so sorry.
it.
Maybe I'm not able to see
Yeah, there is Elizabeth.
folks. Oh yeah, there is Elizabeth. Um, did we? Oh yeah, there she is. Okay, now I can see her. Hi, Elizabeth. You want to quickly introduce yourself, if possible?
Oh, okay. So I'm just a biomedical engineer with some experience studying blockchain since 2021 and trying to put together a couple of projects and just interested, more, trying to do some coding in Solidity, um, of course, HTML and Python. Thank you. Over.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. So, good to have you all. So, I'm just going to real quick reiterate on a couple of things that I just mentioned. What OTAS is, what are we trying, what is Open Asset trying to do with OTAS, and why it's so important for us, right? I mean, we have all been in this industry for long enough to understand that everybody who's building these kind of implementations are building them in silos, right? Which is pretty much breaking the entire spec or a single protocol across all networks, right? This whole initiative that Open Assets is trying to do is come up with a single interface or a single protocol across every organization, which will help them build something which is more agnostic of any chain or identity, right? That said, we have identified or prioritized four work streams, right? Namely, they are settlement networks, identity, compliance, and asset metadata. I'd let Ralph speak a little more about identity because he comes from that background, has a lot of information, valuable information, to be honest, which he shared earlier, and I felt would really help this group as well. For compliance, we will talk a little bit more about, and settlement network. I would let Surendra speak a little more about it as we go along. And asset metadata, I maybe Redwin or we if no one, we will talk a little more later about this. Idea is by the end of this call, we should be able to identify what those four streams look like, who are those contributors, how do we want to manage these streams, do our high level researches, because that's very important. There's a lot of data and a lot of thesis that people have already done in the past, right? We don't want to reinvent that wheel. We want to ensure that those things are covered in our work streams before we move ahead and make our decision points based off that. We can obviously add new things, but we need to have that background as well, right? That's it. I would let Surendra speak a little bit about the settlement network before we move to the identity management as well. Surendra, you're on mute if you're speaking.
No, thanks again, Sarvesh. Again, thanks for joining this, but let me quickly share my screen. Let me put this together. Again, I have shared this probably in one of the panels that I would have discussed in the past. Again, major problem right now, which the traditional finance is seeing this through, is the interoperability problem. Again, Ralph, uh, I know, Redwan, we already kind of, I can see this through in many, many different cases. Every story that what we have seen in the traditional finance institutions, like it's getting locked up. Ralph, like we spoke about this like maybe last week or 2 weeks back ago. There are like a few ways to kind of bring the unlocking the collateral networks, unlocking the settlement layers and all that stuff. But how do we do this in the right way? Is there like a one solution that can able to kind of build the interoperability across all the institutions? Or can we kind of do for one specific asset class, kind of like and build the standards in such a way there is a common language across how we can able to share across many, many different ways to kind of get there? Is the solutions are probably when we need to put it together. After looking into the digital native rails for the stablecoin issuances, and then how you do the mint burn transfer, how we do the freezing of the assets and everything. This is like already the $20 trillion has been already moving into the tether networks like on an yearly basis. But if you start looking into the traditional finances, everything is like locked up. I mean, the repo markets are locked up within the JP Morgan Chase. There is no way that the same unlock is happening between the JP Morgan Chase and BlackRock. And then the BlackRock have their own build fund, which is the money market fund, but they just cannot able to kind of transfer any of their through to the Goldman Sachs network. So there is a industry level problem that's sitting out over there. Do we have a standards right now to kind of, I'm sure like probably there are like maybe few standards are already lying out there, how we can able to kind of bring them up to the way of like using them? Or can we also like use or build a meta standard on top of that, where we can able to kind of like and see the interoperability will not be a problem anymore. So to Sarvesh earlier point, we wanted to kind of take this problem for one of the important asset classes on the settlements, where we are thinking the ETF asset classes, which can touch the underlying equities, underlying bonds, and how we can able to kind of like and bring the conversion orders into that place. And we really wanted to kind of like it started working into the settlement standards and what could be the value that probably we could bring it there. One idea was like, again, Sarvesh and I, we are thinking about the ETF as an asset class, and then slowly kind of like can build the post-trade settlement network, how the conversion orders can work from one system to another system, what would be that common language should look like. So this way, any institutions who is actually building the reference mechanisms up there. So there is a way to kind of trust that layer and then able to kind of build the implementation logic on top of that. Love to kind of like and share more ideas. We will be sharing our white paper on this maybe in the next couple of weeks. Right now, it's in the draft process. Love to hear like your opinions. Love to hear like your uh, uh, ideas, and then probably where we can all grow together as well.
Yes, Surenda. Hi. Could you share your screen again?
Sure.
Yes, this is perfect. Maybe could you explain a little bit more what do you mean by like the settlement, standard here on DVP?
Yeah, two things, Redwin. So on the delivery versus payments, right now, where we are all focusing heavily on the delivery side of the puzzle, where the trades that happens between the market maker and the exchange, that's a super efficient process on its own. But the moment when it moves from the authorized participant into a settlement networks or even to a custodian, that process is not well defined. And what's really happening right now is like every institution spends like maybe tens of different reconciliation processes. Like how do you do the trade matching? How do you do the conversion order? How do you do the implementation logic of the same stuff in many different ways? And that's where the finality of when you do the delivery and when you do the actual physical transfer of that, the standard is not defined yet, and then every institution is figuring it out themselves how to do it in their own way. So right now, what we have come from is from the ETF exchange traded funds. The market maker is clear. The authorized participant is clear, but like they're sending like so much of information back to the custodians and back to the DTCC and to the NSCC. And then there is an infrastructure that's get building out like maybe the BASU framework, which has got like a certain ways to kind of do there. But having a reference language implementation of that, how to do this right at the order level, or maybe out at the trade level, and how we can able to do the counterparty risk level, those probably were the ways, probably where we wanted to kind of like and put some thoughts over there.
I guess, and what I'm trying to understand is like, I understand what you mean from like a traditional infrastructure finance perspective. But as soon as you put like anything on chain, this is actually not like a framework that we should even take as a premise. I see what you mean, like there's a lot of reconciliation and a lot of different layers when you do like, that's why DTCC exists. That was there is transfer agent, that was there is all those different guys. But as soon as we move some blockchain rails, I think we need to change our framework models and more asking our question, what is the risk that we're mitigating? And, the transaction goes through, do you consider final because it's been included in the, for instance, like I'm talking Ethereum to the mainnet because it's been after like 3 confirmation and there's no possible reorg on the chain. And so then that's a finality. I think those are like more very technical question, but yep. What I want to stress here, and I'm not an expert in other ecosystem, but it's, if we try to take like the existing structure and try to match in a blockchain world, we're gonna just become crazy and waste a lot of time.
And that's exactly what's happening right now. And then we really wanted to change that, right? So I mean, I'm sure like you might have read the April SEC guidance report. Right now, with the transfer agent services, you can able to do the conversion orders much more clearer than having to kind of like and go through DTCC. DTCC will exist. DTCC will become like the central point of the record. But like in some asset classes, in some areas where you really can have the transfer agent as the official shareholders record, where you can able to kind of like get the conversion orders done as well. The SEC is saying that, hey, by the way, you really don't need to have like a DTCC entity doing all that stuff, but like there are like a ways to kind of like do the finality. But this is where probably we all need to kind of like step in, kind of like come up with like some proof of concept and then able to kind of build the standards over there as well. But again, to your point, being in the space of like the whole reconciliations, like why a trade matching engine needs to kind of send the same information to a prime broker, why the prime broker needs to send the same information to the custodian, why the custodian needs to kind of like put this and everything onto the NSCC and to the DDCC. That whole process, that how we can able to kind of do the finality on the blockchain so that it's more consistent across the single version of the truth, and that every institution can able to see that. There are ways to kind of get there. I mean, like, can we solve that problem right now? Again, maybe that's where probably we need to kind of like join some hands together and able to kind of come up with more standards as well. But it's a very big problem right now for the unlock. And Raf, maybe if you can maybe talk about like a few things about that, that would be great as well.
Sure. Yeah, so let me share my screen, and then I give you what I think maybe where I'm. You can see my screen, huh?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So at Actus, and I speak for the open source standard, right? So for Actus, we solve two distinctive problems, and then afterwards I'll maybe elaborate on what, like on a graphic that I've written. But we need to understand payments are part of finance. So a payment is the exchange of cash or cash equivalents, and payments are essential, but they're really at the fringes of finance. But finance is the exchange of cash over time by parties according to a financial contract. And that financial contract is the agreement which basically defines who exchanges with whom under which conditions certain payments. So, and that is the basis of all financial activity. There's nothing else. Right. In order to do that, JP Morgan builds a big building, on Park Avenue, etc. That's a side activity, right? The activity is the exchange of cash over time in the form of financial contracts. And when you think about the standards which we pertain ourselves to, right? So you can think about like the FIX protocol and ISO 20022, which is kind of like the embodiment of FIX, right? Like the messaging about movements of things, payments. I think there's other stuff too, right? That is defined in FIX. But Actus defines what needs to be paid when to whom. And you could say why, but but that's basically the issue. And so Actus really concerns itself at the bottom, or maybe I should let me share one more thing, sorry, before I move to the other one. And Actus does one specific, and Actus basically standardizes the world of finance. I apologize, I didn't think here. Actus standardizes the world of finance in, this is what people talk about, composability and so on, which I think is sometimes a misnomer. So Actus gives you basically a periodic system of finance, which lets you understand on a granular level what has been agreed, how is it executed, so machine readable and machine executable term sheets, which define the payment obligations, right? Future cash flows. That's what Actus does. You can look it up on the Actus website. And it really defines, there's like 32 contract types. A normal bank operates in 6 only, okay, fairly simple. You have maturities and non-maturities, you have structured instruments here in the middle, and you have the other side of when contracts do not happen, which is, what is the collateral, what is the guarantee, is there a margin, and is there a repo contract, okay? So that's basically the blueprint of finance standardized in algorithmic terms. That's what Actus does, okay? And maybe a short excursion why this is not well understood in the industry is because when computers entered finance, object-based programming did not exist. So people did not understand that, or could not conceive of these cash flow streams, which are really at the basis of the bank's, of the customer's promise and the bank's business. These cash flow streams, they must be defined based with objects that understand themselves and are consistent between themselves, right? So that is the original sin of IT architecture in finance, is that it doesn't include the function together with the data, right? And we repeat this mistake everywhere now in DLT-based infrastructures, right? People just write terms in what they call smart contracts, but in contracts, right? They just write terms. But how then interest is accrued over time, they do not define. How a variable interest rate would be changed, they do not define. How exactly the mathematical formula is for a 3360, they do not define. Maybe they point to somewhere else, but I guarantee you there's like 3 or 4 different used implementations of 3360 mathematically, right? So if you don't point to the one that you're claiming, to base your contract on, you will have reconciliation problems afterwards. So what Actus does, it concerns itself with asset level interoperability. That's what Actus does, right? And of course, there's a few standards that are related to the Actus standard, and I will quickly show. I'll quickly show this. I make it a bit bigger. So in my view, and then I'll show you the bigger way. In my view, there's like, when you think about a financial asset, when it travels, in these environments today, it should have at least 4 items defined. First is it needs to have a clear identification of the counterparty. That is solved by the LEI. Okay. Then ideally it has like here is a bond, but it's not sufficient. But so for whatever a bond is, the ICMA is making an attempt to have a digital taxonomy, which is machine readable. Okay, so the 2.0 just came out, and it's not bad, but has some room for improvement. Then there is the CDM, which in structured environments, in structured instruments environments, by the way, addresses some of the questions that you guys mentioned about finality, which I'm not that familiar with. Okay, but it also defines contract terms for any kind of swap agreement and ESTAR agreement. What it does not do, in case you're familiar, it doesn't give you a guide on how to value the pieces of these swap agreements, okay, of these swaps, which is kind of like a fairly big oversight, if you ask me, right? So if you don't know how to value the components of your swap in a machine-based standardized form, I think you're in trouble. But so that's our argument with ESTAR. But still, they do a lot of work on the CDM. Certainly does a lot of work on what does it mean to have a final agreement. When is it final? What do I have to do? How is it reported? And then the last item is here this Actus standard. So before I show you the rest of my thing, so maybe I take a few questions if there are any. But I think after like writing about this topic for the last 5-6 years regularly, this is kind of like the minimum basis to define an asset, a financial asset, right?
And Ralph, I think you touched upon a very, very interesting point on the LEI, on the issuer identification.
Yes.
Because obligor, issuer, the risk management practices, there is a huge components of that. Maybe if you can talk a little bit more about that, would be phenomenally helpful for the team.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you said I'm an expert in identity. I'm not. I just know that I'd like to base everything on the LEI, and of course, there's many systems. But when you think about not necessarily DeFi, but when you think about machine-based environments which will explode in the near term, when you think about machine-based environments which will explode, you need a lot more identity, right? So this is why identity is so important. That you can't call anybody and say, please tell me who's the counterparty to this contract, right? You need to have it in a much more in a faster way available, right? So this is why the LEI and the virtual LEI are so critical pieces, for this. That's not consumer-based stuff, right? So I am not, KYC for consumers, is the same issue, but that's a much larger problem, right? Self-sovereign identity and so on.
I mean, Ralph, I mean, the reason why I'm saying this, like the counterparty risk at the obligor level and the issuer
Yes.
level is super important for the actually, especially for the credit risk instruments as well.
Ratings. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, in at least from the US market standpoint, I think there is always like we rely on like certain agencies who could able to kind of like can build that
Yes.
for identification. Again, great to know. I mean, there are like a few standards are already existing there, but again,
But for those of you who don't know, I mean, you know, the LEI is making really, really fast progress now in many jurisdictions. So we can expect a world where in relatively short order, some of the largest economies and certainly the largest emerging economies like India will have an entire infrastructure based on LEI or counterparty identification in business environments, right? In entity environments, which is amazing, right? But okay, so if does anybody have questions to Actus maybe, or you know, or something else? No, Edouard or Jay Oliver?
Oh, I never heard about it. It's super interesting. My understanding is like Actus is actually the way to define a common language of how you define like a contract generally. I'm curious, you know, to
Yes.
how you come up with that canonical I would say data structure for financial assets.
Yes.
I guess what you say is like I don't know, there's probably 100 of different like asset types that exist in the world. They all have like a lot of different data. We could take an angle like very MDM type of structure, you know, like master data management, and say, hey, what's the canonical like structure? But
Yes.
what you're saying is like I love that you haven't put anything blockchain related in this for like nice.
No,
Hey,
that's
now,
before, right? You have to start with
it's
the asset
before.
and then you put it
So
on chain. Yes.
the asset, this is like the minimum canonical information that we need for any financial instrument. That the smallest denominator. Okay.
Yes, that's it. Because it defines the cash flow obligations of the individual parties. And yes, Red One. So this is a problem, right? People always talk about data taxonomy, but they never talk about the function. Not never, but they kind of forget that it needs a function, right? So if you've worked in financial environments, you know that you have data lakes out of your, you have databases out of your ears, but they all give you different values because the functions that are associated to the data that is stored there are not standardized. That's the problem in legacy environments. And if we repeat this mistake in the new DLT-based environment, then each token will become a core banking system which cannot be reconciled with other tokens. And then we'll, you know, this is why no one will ever use it.
Some more silos,
exactly.
Some more silos, and nothing is
Exactly.
interoperable.
Because you're having proprietary solutions to do your own algorithm. So yeah,
yes.
And I think that's the barrier we need to kind of break, making it more open for everyone to use.
So that's and we're just concerning ourselves with this, right? So I'm not concerning myself with what other people do in machine-based, you know, machine-readable and machine-executable environments, which is where do we meet in court? You know, if you're not paying me after I warned you 3 times, right? That's not the purpose of Actus. The purpose of Actus is to say, you know, 151.75 is owed at this point in time because you signed a contract 3 months ago that says it's owed. Okay, that's what the purpose of Actus is. The risk assessment, the discounting to a today value or to a future value, that is proprietary. That is based on your expectations, right? But it should be based on the deterministic agreement that was signed originally. And if the deterministic agreement, which is open source, is available to the people that, you know, that are authorized to look at a deterministic agreement, then that solves a lot of problems. Right. So that's the idea. And then maybe just how I see then I give back. So how I see, the rest of this infrastructure, right? So again, you guys are much deeper in the, in the weeds of how this works. But in a simplified world, when you look at these two worlds here, on the left-hand side, that's the traditional environment. So theoretically, at some point, someone should have done this properly, okay, first. And then you put it in these existing systems, these CSDs, right? And these CSDs then tell you, what is the truth. You can always call them back and say, what was meant with that, right? But which is what Red One said, right? You can always say, please give me exactly what was written in this. But of course, you have a lot of systems that then grew, like Calypso, Condor, Excel, core banking systems that interpret this data in their own various ways, right? And then somehow it works, this financial system, how well or how bad, that's a different question. But in these tokenized environments, then you still need all this, what we defined here. You need to have it. Otherwise, you do not understand what you're negotiating in a machine executable environment. So Edwin, and let me rephrase, it's basically a machine readable and machine executable financial term sheet. That is what Actus gives you, a machine readable and a machine executable financial term sheet, which is standardized. That's what it gives you. So, and then, of course, you have many other things, right? You need token frameworks, you need service providers that provide the infrastructure where the stuff is traveling, you need privacy layers, etc. Right? And then these arrows here, of course, they're all infrastructure that you talked about. Maybe it needs to be standardized. How can this be? But if you don't even know what the asset is, it's not of much help if you connect venues, or if you do technical connections. You need the logic somewhere retrievable as well, right? And if we need to call Bloomberg every time, or Keiko, to understand what exactly this is, then we're making no progress.
Yeah.
So that's my spiel.
Awesome. So this is great, right? I mean, we have a good understanding, and we have very knowledgeable people who can pretty much help us drive our initiative further. I want to see Redwin. Where can I would really appreciate to understand from your perspective, given the four pillars that I already spoke about, where would your interest lie the most so that we can try to kind of come up with a plan as to, set up contributors accordingly and see where, each of us can get more traction on which stream, right?
Okay.
We have got, as I said, we've got the settlement layer, we've got the identity layer, we've got the asset metadata, as well as the final one, which I do not recollect at the moment, compliance. Right. So these are the four pillars that we discussed. I know I'm really thinking, again, Ralph comes from that, he's been a stalwart in that, as I said earlier. So maybe identity might be a good option. But again, I will let Ralph, Redwin, you guys decide which ones you feel is the right approach, and then, lead the way, right? Um, from our perspective, we are more interested and more leaning towards this post-trade settlement approach. So we might be taking a little more traction and more, leadership or accountability there. So, but I'm looking for more candidates on the other streams that we are putting together.
And also collectively we can do. I mean, it's not about one track.
Exactly. And it's not
Yeah.
one track for one person. We can collectively do everything,
Yeah.
but I still need to have some face for every stream. That's how I'm looking at it, Surendra.
And also
Um,
Ralph could be, I mean, that the unified the asset meta types, right? I think that could be a great for actors to kind of like and show the thought
Yes.
leadership, because like there
Yep.
is a huge work that has already been built out over
yeah,
there as well.
yeah,
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Redwan, I mean, and thanks for sending that identity
yeah.
solutions.
The link, it's amazing.
Share anything on that, Redwan?
Yeah. Like I've done a lot of research, and I know also I have other reports that I will share with the group if you want, around like the different existing standards I mean, there is obviously ERC 3643. I know Dennis very well, and I've been very close to what they do because they deploy in a lot of jurisdiction. There is another one, 71 3643, 7943 also, that is gonna probably soon pass the standard level on the Ethereum process. Then there is some few other that exist, like 14,000, I think, and maybe another one that I heard.
Share your screen, Red One, or do you want me to share my screen?
Sorry?
Do you want to share your screen?
No, I don't have anything to show right now. It's from just from memory. But
Okay.
I know like those different standards, they have like some different design assumption. I think probably like 7943 is probably like the one that's emerging as the more modular. And those can be good inspiration because I think it's not necessary to all reinvent the wheel. People have probably already like done something. And it's also, I would say, everyone, if you talk to Securitize, to all the big tokenization platform, they might not say it, but they're gonna do like an extension of ERC 3643. So like they just modify like few modules, but that's it. However, I always think it's a good way to take, like, as Ralph said, like a good approach of saying, why are we doing this? And what's the what, like really defining like the reason, because what I see is being very important is that we understand the underlying of why something is necessary, even like a reporting or compliance from a logical perspective, because the way even like data is structured and data like flow in a blockchain ecosystem environment is so very different that even if we take like a pure, object programming approach, that's not going to work out, and we might like reproduce not the mistake, but like the shortfalls of what Ralph described to a different level. So
in a different area, yeah.
Because I was talking with like some compliance recently with some different banks, and so some auditors, like some auditors are one of the big four, and even the rules of compliance right now are designed with something in mind, and it would take to really rethink, almost like not philosophically, but think of like why those rules existed. There was an incident, so they decided to do this, and so we need to really go back to the genesis of all the thing. Why we have CSD and DTCC, because there was like 10 million papers that were blocking New York in the late 70s, and so they say they have to stop the market for like I think a week. I mean, the paper crisis. I think that's the name. So, but what I'm saying is that I think really like the approach that you mentioned, like, Ralph, like to really think about like functions and what needs to be achieved. It's also like a way for us to avoid like getting into a spiral, because there's so many adjacent systems. And the way I've been looking at it, say, hey, let's define like some common language and maybe rely as much as we can on the existing process. We're not going to reinvent the way there is like some global arbitrage when there is a disagreement between Poland and Saudi Arabia on some specific trade or something like that. They're going to operate probably like the same way, but we need to define like how this is going to be represented in those systems in a way that is not creating more silos and making more like, I think, those assets like flowing.
And did one talking about that 3643? Not a big fan of that. But I mean, 7943, I think that could be a new way of doing things.
It's said it more now.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so I mean, so many challenges with the 3643. I mean, we speak to compliance officials like in many different institutions. The compliance officials are not going to go anywhere at all. They will be there, they will be available, they will be have to do like so many checks. It's also, I mean, in my honest opinion, it's not so prudent to kind of think, hey, by the way, can I put the PII data? Can I put all this in? It's not a scalable solution. I mean, it's been our preaching, and that's why we always build like, hey, the compliance module should be independent on its own. But the important thing is like the identification factor that ties like who would be the token who would be the holder of that token, how is like a universally acceptable identifier. That's the solution we are looking. But again, maybe I did not go through the 7943 standards. More than happy to kind of look more into that, but that could be a great exercise, Redwin. Again, I don't know if you feel the same way or like you have any more weightage on the 3643 standard there.
I'm not very opinionated in a way that I'm not tokenizing things. I'm not the one doing. It's more like I know like a lot of organization use it, and so I'm based really on usage. So that's my bias.
Yeah.
If tomorrow like there is a $200 billion deployed using 7943, I will like I would say
Yeah.
pay more attention in some way. Not that but I think like that's really a how I heard. And from the research I did, is like ERC 3643 is very opinionated. It's a little bit expensive also to deploy on Ethereum, like some costs, like the way you need to have like your contract on every network. And the on-chain ID, especially, I think it's something that I've heard like a lot of even institutions saying they have to rebuild. And it's like it's one thing, to provide like a blueprint saying, hey, you
Oh,
can
it
build.
mandates an ID. It mandates 3643. It mandates its own ID logic or what? Verification of the IDs?
Yeah. So it's an open source kind of identification like process, but the only company that has some toolings for it are like Tokeny. And so
Yeah,
you
the
talk
vendor
to
lock-in.
Joachim, and I think he say, yeah, it's open source. It's people that don't know how to implement. Say, well, like you cannot say, hey, here is a beautiful house, and you give them the blueprint of the house, and then next door say, well, if you really need one, I have mine that is built in here. It's the. I mean, I think people are probably more like experiencing standards. Like that's probably a classic thing, but and so that's why I started like doing some research like a month ago about like how we could maybe have a different representation of the KYC on chain, more open source, very minimalistic. And it's how I ended up actually in that group.
I see. I mean, it's naive for me, but I think that's the VLEI. No, I mean, but okay, I don't know. I mean, that should be solved, right? But
actually, Ralph, like the question is, the way I've been thinking about it is, I think we have people from a lot of different countries right now. Like I'm French American. We have like, if we all pull out our passports, our passport is the same size. There is probably the same amount of pages. There's the position of our name in every of our different country in the same place. The code down at the passport is the same also, and that's a standard. That's called like the ICAO standard. And each of our countries, they're going to have different process, different people we need to talk, different paper that we need to have to get a passport. It's the proprietary of every country. Same if I want to go to some specific country, I'm going to have like a different like a visa process from someone else. And so, but yet we still have in every airport the same format. And my idea was like, okay, how about we find that representation for digital assets on chain, saying we just define the passport format. We're not going to talk about like how you get the passport, how you scan the passport, how you revoke the passport. When you lose a passport, we'll give it again. And I don't know if it's the right approach, but I was like saying maybe we can start from here because there's so many questions. Oh, okay, I lost my passport. Someone stole it. Someone is making a fake passport. There's all those different questions. But first, we don't even have, I think, right now, like a common passport. Like some financial instrument, they use a passport. Some other, like they have like maybe a notebook. Some other, they have like a post-it. And so this is, I think, what's going on right now. And that it's very difficult because even when that makes like all like the UBS tokenization of the same financial instrument cannot interrupt like and talk to the one from BlackRock,
GPM
from
or whatever.
BNP, from GPM. And that's something that they keep saying like that would be extremely powerful.
And I think that's the barrier OTAS is trying to kind of address as well. Correct. If you look at the mission statement that OTAS is trying to provide is the same, right? We want to have a unified standard where a Goldman or a JPM will be able to use and be interoperable. Correct? I think we are all speaking the same language, and I think that's the reason we are all here, to be honest. Um, I like your approach of what you spoke about your KYC standards and how they are, how we want to make them open source and more standard rather than siloed. I think having a good understanding of the 3643, the 7943 as our thesis point might be a good starting point for our identity or our compliance work stream, right? Maybe that can be something that we can start. Ralph, maybe I will let you define how you want to take the identity work stream forward. We have a few things that we can add to our to the post-trade settlement stream as well. And then we can all combine our efforts, have these conversations on. I would let you guys eventually decide, but I would rather have it initially for the first every 2 weeks. And then as we progress, we see more and more development happening. When I say development, development not coding wise, but more on data that we are collecting, on the thesis that we are doing, on the knowledge that we are gaining. We can then kind of make it more monthly basis so that we have enough time to kind of come up with our milestones, see what we are doing. I can take a little more ownership on the project planning perspective as to what our milestones look like, what we want to define and deliver within X time, which will give us something to look forward for rather than just doing research, because we can all do that, but eventually we need to have a goal and have some sign-offs on that. So this way it'll be a good testing point for us as well. Um, that said, does that sound a plan that we can look into?
Well, I think, if you ask me, Actus is ready for your asset definitions, right? So on the identity,
Perfect.
I
That's
don't have a
awesome.
lot to contribute, right?
Which is perfectly
So,
fine.
so that's fine. That's where I can bring more resources to the table and so on.
Perfect.
I think identity, I can ask Alexandre, especially if it's endorsed by Linux Foundation, and if we get a little bit of scaffolding around it from the Linux Foundation or LFTT, then that's what these organizations are for. Then LEI should we should get a resource from LEI that basically
which is fine.
deals with that.
I think we should have that conversation. If you have to initiate that conversation, I do have these calls with them. Maybe we can have, I can also speak to them and try to push for
You
it.
should, yeah. LEI is the easiest, and maybe there's only one other. I'm thinking about who else would be valuable. I don't know about Asia, but Asia is moving really fast on LEI, right? So I don't know whether there's but somebody maybe. We also have to think about the people's interest, and there are a few organizations that I'm sure we will find more, but I know of one specifically. You have to combine. I think if we want to be successful, we need to combine the commercial aspect. We need to combine the open source aspect with the commercial aspect.
With the commercial aspect, yes.
And there are people that are building technology for the implementation and the use of LEI, right? Commercial technology. So these are the people that we should find, because they have an interest in the LEI and they have an interest in contributing, that the stuff gets used.
Yes,
right? So,
correct.
So that's
who
one.
would be those? So how would we start off with that? The reason why I'm trying to ask you this question is because you come from that background. You might have a little more understanding on who those people are, so that we can, if Elia is if we have a group for that, then we should try to kind of involve them in this so that they can help us push this forward.
Yeah, right? And maybe there's on the identity side, but again, maybe Edwin knows more. Cecilia. On the identity side, there's a lot of work being done on the Linux side as well, right? On the IDs and stuff like that, right? So I think that should be easy. Yeah. My concern, and I think on the post-trade and on the settlement environment, there's a lot of interest because people understand they need to solve this problem, right? This is why FIX exists. It took, 25 years for FIX to, gain really traction. But that's the reason why FIX exists in the legacy world, because they all knew we can't work with each other and make money everywhere unless we solve this problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And just on the post-trade piece, we also wanted to go, I mean, to your point, these standards, if we start doing this, it's going to take like 5 to 10 years. But we are
Mhm.
looking at, hey, by the way, let's take like one specific asset class, let's do it well, and then kind of like an open
Yeah,
that. So that's probably how we
exactly.
really want to kind of look into this.
Yeah.
And thanks, like, Ralph, just on the four tracks. The asset metadata, I think you should completely own it, and then you should bring it to the ecosystem roadmap to the whole community, right? Redwan, maybe I'm just thinking out loud. Uh, I think you have, since like you have the most practical source reference implementations for the compliance. Again, it could be like an ID, it could be like mostly kind of like in how the KYC, and more than happy to kind of share some of the research, probably what we have done in the past. But again, this could be like a good starting point. Again, the whole idea what Sarvesh is trying to do is like, let's do the survey of the map on what we have already in the market. And then rather than like redoing the standards, but let's say, hey,
Yeah.
by the way, this is probably what's working out the best. Let's bring them forward. Or maybe if this is not something, maybe this could be needs to be improved, maybe bring that community together to us, and so that we can all work together. But again, the whole idea is like not creating the standards for the sake of creating standards. Let's build the right thing so that the industry can win, and then it could be like a lot more bigger unlock for all of us to work in the future as well, in the right way.
Yeah, I'm
Sarvesh,
curious also
go ahead,
how you
Redman.
think about that. I think we should bring more of the business in here. We need some banks, some CSD like
Yep.
Euroclear, like DTCC, like they need to be present at the table right now. Like those guys, like also it's super important that we find someone like on either like Nadine or Dan teams to be part of this. I can ask Jorgen also, but I think
No,
that's
this is great. Redwan, I think just on the signatory standpoint, we already have like few of the top tier institutions are already signing up. That's where that's probably we're already bringing it to the table. And but the only thing is we also have to come up with like a unified way of like concise saying that, hey, bio, this is probably how we want to do it. This is the plan. This is how we kind of get there. The institutions are like literally they are talking the same thing in every room. They wanted to do this, not do it, because it's a timing problem at this point of time. But if there is a path, if there is a forward, if there is a planning, things will happen. I mean, and this is where LFDT is also helping to kind of bring the signatories, everyone together in one table. So we'll talk more about that stuff as well, right? But
okay.
I know we are at time right now, and as next steps, if possible, I don't know how we can do this, but can we share or can we, commit to the GitHub as such? Like, then maybe I need the emails or something where I can contact you guys. I have no idea how I can contact all of you.
no, talk to Daniel Sarvesh. So
Daniela? Okay.
and then he can help you kind of like and get all the email addresses in one place. But please make sure that every 2 weeks, let's have this meetings and then take forward, right? I'm sure like one step a day, kind of like moves faster, but like let's do it. Again, this is the right
Yeah,
time that everybody's looking into this problem as well.
of course. We are at 11. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. Was very helpful. I'll be setting a recurring meetings on the GitHub page itself. Um, and once I have all your emails, I will, kind of create a group and send it to all of you so that, I mean, you also have it on your calendars, even though you don't get a chance to look at the OTAS page. Yeah. And then maybe the next time we'll have more action based call, and might not be as long as the one we had today. We'll just keep it to a point where we are defining our structure, defining our documentation, defining our contributors, and put the MD files and so on and so forth, and move forward. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. You guys have a nice day. Nice meeting you all. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.